Good morning. A great start. All right. As a nutritionist, one of the hardest things is to try to be simple. We love, over the next days, you're going to hear, without a doubt, so many parts to nutrition. You're going to hear I've already seen, the ketogenic diet. You're going to hear about intermittent fasting. You're going to hear about which foods to focus on and which foods to watch out for. You're going to hear a lot about nutrition. And as a practicing nutritionist, and for most of my life, looking after people's health, actually giving recommendations that they'll follow is one of the hardest things. So what I'd like to share with you at the start of this conference is simplicity. Something that you can always step back to. Because, like I said, the complexity, when we make things too hard for people, when we give too many food lists, when we complicate them, often we don't get the results we're after. People get overwhelmed. And when they get overwhelmed, they often quit. So I want to show you today how to eat in 6 simple steps. 6 things that you can fall back on when things aren't working. 6 things that when your client looks at you with glazed eyes with all the sheets and you're thinking, oh, this is where we're going to start, and they feel a bit overwhelmed, that you can ask yourself first, are these foundations already set? Now, as a nutritionist, I personally also love, and as a clinical nutritionist, looking at labs and then saying, okay, I think we need to go in this direction. But what I've learned in nutrition, there are 2 parts. There are the rules, and there's individuality. The rules apply to all of us as human beings. I'm going to share some of the rules today. And over the next days, you're going to hear more about the individuality. This person needs less carbohydrates, maybe a ketogenic diet. This person should space out their eating because it works better for them. So maybe intermittent fasting. Maybe this person needs a elimination style diet because of their sensitivities. That's individuality. And like most of you, I'm sure I love that part. But like I said, to start with a foundation, to start with a level playing field for me, has always been the most important thing. To get a person to get success and then to build on that. So that's what this talk's about, and I hope you're going to enjoy it. Most of you know this. It's 20 years ago, I'm sitting in a lecture theatre, and we're talking about nutrition. And the professor says, especially for those who are going to enter the force, in terms of the workforce, many of us went on to the Australian Institute of Sport, others went into gyms, others went into clinics, others went into other areas of health. But when we sat down for nutrition, we were given the food pyramid and the calorie model. They were our 2 tools. Most of us, we were told, would be dealing with obesity, which today is still the case. I deal with a lot of obesity. But this food pyramid started it all. We were meant to just give a calorie deficit and give these recommendations that included mostly eating grains, breads, pasta, cereal. 6 to 11 servings, they told us. Then great, we moved on to the vegetables. I still hear in Australia now, 5 veg, 2 fruit, these sort of recommendations. Then the meat, the protein, the specific protein, meat, poultry, fish, eggs. And obviously we've got the dairy. The dairy industry had their input too. And at the top, we put fats, oils, and sweets together. Fats, oils, and sweets. So olive oil and a Mars bar got put together. Crazy, right? But this is what we believed, and when I was in university 20 years ago, there was a lot of nodding. The person out the front was a lot smarter than I am. This must have been designed by the smartest people in the room. Later to read that this got designed, the model was actually Swedish originally, but the American model got designed by half the food industry and half food scientists who had a problem with fats, particularly saturated fats. So your butter, your coconut oil, which for me has some benefits, And so they were the ones that were going to cause a heart disease, and fat was going to make our clients fat. So we had to reduce it because there's more calories. So that got the top of the chain. This is the older version. So next came our My Plate. This is the current US government, still shown by many governments. It's an improvement in my part because this one here tells everybody 6 to 11 servings, and it's like, what? For who? How big are they? This one just says, hey, could you fill up a quarter of your plate with vegetables? I'm like, okay, that's a good start. Could we have some protein? Could we have some grains? Could we put some fruit and some dairy on the side? It's still, for me, it's not that helpful. There's still a lot more we can do. My daughter's 10 years old. She goes to an international school. I live in Phuket, and she goes to an international school there. And she came home one day with this plate. And what they had her do was to draw up this plate. And each section, they had it all in these little sections. And in these sections, she got a magazine and she cut out things and she stuck them on. And she brought it home and she had a giggle. And she showed me and said, look what I did in science today. Look at my plate, Dad. What do you think? This is what everybody did. And in her plate, in the section, she had grains. They had the grain section. And they had some nice baguettes, nice French baguettes, nice refined grains. And in the protein, they had different forms of meat in there. And vegetables, fortunately, there were a couple of carrots cut out and a couple of celery and all the rest. In the fruits, Tesco orange juice. We just heard about fruit juice, didn't we? So it's like, great, fruit juice, fruit. We're already planting these seeds. And dairy was a cup of fruity yogurt, which probably had more sugar than anything else in it. And that's the start for our kids. And so she laughed because she knows she's been a bit brainwashed. Her dad's a nutritionist. We talk about the best foods, and food is a big part of the family. We try to sit down every night, share a dinner, and in terms of breakfast. And so she had a laugh and said, this is what I did. And I said, ooh, maybe we should have a chat to the teacher. Let's go in and have a conversation. So, with that in mind, this is our starting point. Over the last, especially 15 years, when I really started questioning what I learnt at school, I started trying to do what Dr. Patnar just said, think outside the box as a nutritionist. I was getting results. I was getting people to clean up their diets, get more movement, talk about their mindset. But nutrition for me just still didn't stick. I was having some people who just following the recommendations wasn't getting a result. Things weren't working. It was too complex for some. Some people were reacting to certain foods, certain things were happening. And so I entered what I call the rabbit hole. And I was very fortunate to be schooled by some amazing doctors, functional medicine doctors, 15 at the start, holistic doctors they were called, naturopaths, and started to try to understand more of the role of nutrition. Not just about calories, but about how foods affect us. And then also in terms of the mindset. And it must have been about 12 years ago, I came across something different. And it was more a philosophy. It was this. Now, if you can see the date at the bottom, it says 1917 US Food Administration. And I saw this and I went, wow, that's different. That's different from my food pyramid. What happened from this to the USDA food pyramid? What was the change? And I looked through and I said, food, buy it with thought. Cook it with care. Use less meat and wheat. Buy local foods. Serve just enough. Use what is left. Don't waste it. Where's my 6 to 11 servings of grains in there? Where did they tell us that we were meant to have this much? This became a bit of a philosophy. Now, if you can recognize 1917 wasn't the greatest of times. There was a reason why that was invented, why they worked on that in the US. And there are other parts in terms of the world. Part of 1917 was obviously World War I. There was a war. This was how to eat for a war. And my little metaphor today is we have a war going on right now. We have an epidemic. We have an amount of preventable diseases that I believe, and this is why I love my job, that we can make a big difference with nutrition and with movement and with mindset and with lifestyle. We can reverse, we can make an impact on people's lives who are going down that route. The amount of heart disease we see today, the amount of cancer we see today, all the diseases that have an element of lifestyle, of nutrition, that we could actually support and make a difference. And so for me, there is a bit of a war. And that's every time I go out to the center, every time I meet a person, that's one of my aims, to help them in their battle. And these 6 steps, are some of my tools, my weapons for them. So let's go through them now. Number 1, buy it with thought. Now, I have to always say when I'm doing a talk, often the studies are coming from America, but we can switch Americans for any country in the world today. Australia, Europe, Thailand. More than half of what the world is eating is ultra-processed. What does ultra-processed mean? It means we took a whole food and we refined it, we changed it, we added a preservative to make it sit on that shelf for longer. We added a coloring to make it look pretty. We added an additive to give it this sweetness or this taste, this MSG or something like that. We changed our food, and not for the better. I have one saying, the more man touches a food, the worse it gets. The more we market it, the worse it is. The more plastic and the more production and the more advertising they spend, the worse it is. And unfortunately, more than half of what probably your clients who come and see you, your patients who come and see you, are going to be eating this. So it's great to do interventions like a ketogenic diet. It's for those especially in terms of blood sugar levels, heading towards diabetes. It's great to really specify. But first and foremost, we've got to say one thing. Eat real food. Eat real food. So what's a real food? What's the difference between an ultra-processed food and a real food? Well, if you ever come shopping with me, I'm a terrible shopper. I love kind of walking around. It's kind of a little expedition, going around, having a look what everybody else is doing, having a look at them, seeing what people are out there buying. But I give my clients a few tips. Number 1, aim for single item foods. If you're going to put it in the trolley, look for single items. Look that I can see this. This is broccoli. This is a nut and a seed. If it's an egg or if it's a piece of fruit, you can see where it came from directly. When you start seeing foods that have 5 different ingredients, have use-by dates that go on, then a little red flag should be. And so I say to my clients, okay, consistency, not perfection. You've probably heard of the 80-20 rule. Fill that trolley, fill that shopping basket, fill it with as many single item foods as you can. That's a great start. That will change just that one act of people eating and focusing on real food, traditional food, food that their ancestors, their grandparents were the staples. It's so boring, but it's so true today. When I look around, I look at all the 7-Elevens, I look at the kids turning up to school and all their little packaged things, and I think, oh my God, how is that child meant to start studying? That person running off to work, grabbing that simple refined food and washing it down with something quick, giving that Red Bull or getting that thing to pick them up. So out of those foods, that's where 90% of the sugar is coming from. And we've just seen now fructose, high fructose corn syrup, that's what they're putting mostly in it. That's sugar on steroids. That's the big problem we have today. It's cheap, it's nasty, it's inflammatory. We've seen about uric acid. It's the enemy. So number 1, buy real food. Focus on real food. If a person can actually look at food, this is what I say to clients, look at food and say to yourself, that is about to become part of me. Remember our biology. Atoms become molecules, become macromolecules. And from those macromolecules, we make tissue, we make a cell, the first living entity. And from all those cells, we make tissues, organs, systems, and organisms. So I say to every client, these cells, these living, breathing entities, what you're about to do is going to manipulate, is going to change them. So every time you look at a food, you say, do you want that to become part of you? You've heard, you are what you eat. You are what you eat, and you are what you assimilate. You are what you take on. But if we can look at food as how it's going to affect us, and it directly does, then that can make a difference. So we take this food. Unfortunately, though, we might start with a good food, and then what do? We deep fry it. We cook it. I bless my grandmother, but I know how she cooked that broccoli, and when it came out, there wasn't much left to it. So what they said was, cook it with care. See, here's the thing. Food should be precious. If we can look at food, and we don't look at it that way today, we look at food and think, I'm hungry, I need to fill myself, I'm going to eat. If we looked at every time that we're about to eat something, that this is precious. And that's what in 1917, they looked at food and said, there's not that much around. I'm going to take advantage of this, and I'm going to sit here and I'm going to eat my food, not in front of the television, not distracted. I'm actually going to maybe I'll even say grace. In my family, we try to even say grace. To say, wow, isn't it amazing? Thank the person who brought this food. Thank the cook. Thank the food that's brought to me, and it's going to make a difference. We know that. But here's a study that showed repeated heating of oil accelerates in terms of, we're going to hear about oxidation. We know a lot about oxidation, inflammation over the next days. How oxidation destroys the cells. Rusting and fire, big parts. Smashes in terms of the cell wall made of those lipids, causing, you've probably heard of oxidation species, ROS, and this is why these free radicals are coming. So we deplete our antioxidants, that's where the free radicals are trying to combat. And what are we left with? High blood pressure. Yeah, things in terms of obviously accelerating with the uric acid, diabetes, and in terms of our tissue, inflammation. This cooking process, how much are we eating that's been prepared in this way, using these oils? And what I say to a person is, when it comes to oils, when you're going in your shopping cart and you're looking for it, how you cook it, what you cook it with is one of the most important things. So here's 3 things to tell your patients, your clients, when it comes to cooking, when it comes to an oil to watch out for. Here's 3 nasty parts to an oil. If it is cheap, in a plastic bottle, and yellow, raise a red flag. Let's compare cheap, plastic bottle, yellow, clear, with something like extra virgin olive oil. Expensive. Glass. And when you pour it out, you can see it. You can see the real deal. So we want to, as many of those, if we have those in our house, and our patients, to tell them, hey, I know it says vegetable oil. The food industry is beautiful at giving names. Its name is a refined seed oil. Canola, sunflower, safflower. I remember watching a 60 Minutes show on this amazing this was back in, I saw a clip, and it was from, I think, the 80s, how we had to get rid of butter and coconut, all the saturated fats out of the diet, and we were going to replace them with margarine and these refined seed oils. And they showed the process on 60 Minutes. And they went how they extracted it with solvents, how it came out as this black sludge that they had to deodorize it and refine it, and then suddenly it was this beautiful clear product. And you think, there is nothing natural in this process. But they're vegetables, and often they get a nice big fat tick from the Heart Foundation to say cholesterol is down. There's no cholesterol in it, great. There's a lot of other things that potentially can happen. So if you can choose your oils, think about what your grandparents cooked with. Think about 100 years ago. I know there's a lot of talk in terms of olive oil. Can I cook with it? Can I not? I personally would cook with an olive oil much more readily than one of these refined seed oils. But traditional fats make such a difference in terms of, like I said, how we cook. So, number 2, when you cook, and it's not just about the oils, we could go into how to cook. I'm Australian, there's nothing better than a barbecue. And I joke around about my brother, who we have to get away from the barbecue because he burns everything. So overheating those meats, you've probably heard of denaturing proteins. Denature, changing the nature of it, destroying a protein. So overcooking is a problem. So that's where I'm a big fan of things like steaming. If it's raw, in terms of certain forms, great. Blanching, steaming, quick stir fry. But overcooking, destroying all the nutrients, especially when that was a real food, we have to watch out for. So they said, cook it with care. Food is precious. Cook it with care. Use less wheat and meat. There's a war. Hard to get this stuff. But I think we've got a little bit of a war going on. Like I said, now could excess amounts of these two highly commercial foods drive our blood sugar and inflammatory disease epidemic? I'm going to clarify the two parts. Now, the food pyramid, if you remember, the bottom of the old food pyramid said eat mostly grains, start the day with a breakfast cereal, whole wheat. In Australia, it was Wheat Bix for breakfast, Wheat Bix and some skim milk. For me, that's definitely not what I'm feeding my two young kids. Having real foods, including things like eggs. I'll take that cholesterol. I'll take a real food. But let's have a look at wheat. Many of you have probably heard of the glycemic index, the rate a carbohydrate converts to sugar. The higher the glycemic index, the quicker it converts to sugar. Think of our little fire. There's a little fire going on here. I throw my white bread on and whoosh, like kerosene. That's why it gets a top mark for a lot of the glycemic index. It gets a score of 100. And then I get my vegetable, I get my whole grain, and it simmers a bit more. The fiber slows it down, slows the glycemic index. Then I put my vegetables on, and they're like logs, and they give me sugar very slowly. All that fiber slows it down. So we had this glycemic index. Then some clever guys in Australia came up with and said, well, what about protein and fat? How does that affect our hormone regulating our blood sugar? This is pretty important. We need to understand insulin. 20 years ago, we didn't talk about insulin as nutritionists. It's crazy. We talked about calories in, calories out, food pyramids. If we understood insulin's role, we'd realize that putting breads and pastas at the bottom of the food pyramid is a disaster. If there's anything that should be at the bottom of the food pyramid, for me, it would be vegetables. It just makes sense. But here's what we got. Insulin index, what they came up with, measuring eating a protein, fat, or a carbohydrate. How was insulin affected? We see at the top, for those who like jelly beans, you're the winner. Pretty quick. Pancakes for breakfast, anybody? Pretty quick. Send the blood up, insulin's going to come in. The more we play with it, the more resistance we have, the more metabolic syndrome and all the things that are affected, including this. White bread, right up there. This section here, now I'm not going to endorse all the foods. We're talking about how a hormone works. But what do we notice? Avocado, one of my favorite foods. I love avocados. I love the fat. I think they're one of the most amazing foods. Butter. Butter at the bottom. They're at the bottom. Why are they at the bottom? Because fat and fiber are two keys to balancing blood sugar. As I say, there is no meal that I have that does not try to have fat and fiber. And I'm talking good fats. I'm not talking Kentucky Fried Chicken, deep fried sort of stuff. I'm talking about real fats that our ancestors understood, that our body will love, that our cell made of fat will take on, not flip over and cause oxidation and damage and inflammation to the cell. Fat and fiber. The opposite to refined grains. So for me, with clients, bringing down these refined grain products is one of the priorities. Meat. Complex one. A lot of different studies, in terms of controversy, should we be vegetarian, should we not? Vegetarian for a while, I realized that having some animal proteins in my diet helped me. But what I don't touch especially is the processed ones. The ones they add the nitrates to preserve them, where they throw everything together. I do believe in balance. I do believe in mostly, you'll hear me, a plant-based diet. But I have small amounts of animal products. But what I tell every client is if you eat animal products, please spend extra please spend extra. You don't eat as much, spend extra on quality. I remember shopping with my brother one time. We're shopping around and there was a chicken. We're going to have roast chicken that night. And I put in a chicken and it was $15. It was certified free range. It was fed in terms of a non-GMO corn. It was walking around, as I say, in terms of animal, hopefully just had one bad day. And he said, "What are you doing? It's $15 for the chook." That's what we call chickens in Australia. $15. You could buy 3 of those cheap ones over there. And I said, "You can take your cheap ones. Quality counts. You are what you eat. I'll take my expensive one. I'll eat a little bit less. And I'll cook it properly and not have all the problems with all the hormones, the antibiotics, how it was fed, stuck in a cage, those sort of things." But especially when it comes to this processed meat, there are enough studies that show it is a problem. It is a problem. What they put in there to preserve it, how they're producing it, there is definitely a problem. So, reducing the wheat, reducing the meat. Cool. Maybe that could be helpful. Number 4, they said, buy local foods. At the time, I didn't think it was a great start. My parents had a fruit and veggie shop. And you might think, wow, I grew up in Australia, beautiful weather in Perth, surfing, but I had to get up at 4 a.m. on weekends, holidays, and help my parents in their fruit and veggie shop. But one of the things I realized was quality of foods. I remember saying to my dad, "Oh my God, Dad, look at these navel oranges from California. These Americans, they make the best oranges. They're beautiful, they're waxed, they're amazing." We had orange trees, we had fruit trees, we had vegetables, we grown vegetables, we had chickens, all that in our backyard. But when I tried the Californian navels compared to my local Valencia that flew off the tree and had all the black spots and was kind of looking a little bit rough and ugly, nothing compared. It was just picked. The tree had ripened it. It was sitting there. It wasn't waxed. It wasn't made to look so beautiful. But I tell you what, the taste was so different. Just like our chicken eggs, eating our scraps, our leftovers, the egg was so golden. Buy local foods. If we can encourage, I say to every client, if you can go out of your way to go to a farmer's market. Coming from a small business, we had supermarkets come in, and in the end, my parents actually lost their business. Supermarket took over. So I have this little thing against big business coming in and stealing the little guy's kind of, his business. But this is an amazing quote for me. It's actually coming from Professor Boyd Swinburne, who's at the Deakin University in Melbourne, but working with the World Health Organization. And he says, the simultaneous increases in obesity in almost all countries seem to be driven mainly by changes in the global food system. The stuff we're seeing in the 7-Elevens, the stuff we're seeing all at the front in the supermarkets, which is producing more processed, affordable, and effectively marketed food than ever before. So if we can encourage our clients, hey, shop locally, go to the local producer, try as much as you can to go out of your way. Food is precious. The more you think it's precious, the more it'll affect your health. They knew that then. Serve just enough. I had a lady last week, I was giving a talk, and she said, "I know what my problem is, Craig." She was overweight. And she said, "I eat too much." And she threw this comment out like, "It's my problem, I eat too much. I like food too much. I eat too much." And I stood there, and we were in a group situation, and I stood there and I said, "Why?" And she wasn't expecting me to say why. Now, I didn't want to embarrass her because there were other people there, but I wanted to ask, why? Why are you overeating? Now, I understand. Psychology has been such a big part of my world. I studied sports science psychology. I loved how to move the body, and I wanted to know, what makes us tick? What makes us different? Why does this person get this result and this person get another result? On the last day, I'm going to give a talk on my experiences with clients in terms of one who changes and one who doesn't, and what I'm continually learning 20 years on about achieving success, long-term health success. But I said to her, why? And so when I have a client who throws that at me and says, "I eat too much, Craig, that's my problem. I like food too much," I say, okay, how can I help this person think differently? How can I change their way? So I got 3 ways for you. 3 ways that I often. First though, let's just be honest. Yes, the majority of the population do eat too much. This is from Dr. H.E.A.T showing that since 1970, there's been at least a 20% increase. Now the increase, without a doubt, would have been all these processed foods, but the processed foods, the amount, take a look at that. 1950s, 3.9 ounce hamburger versus today's Super Size Me at 12 ounces. Oh my God, if you've seen that movie Super Size Me, you'll see where this is coming from. Great film, great documentary. Look at the fries. Throw that up and our fructose on a stick. Those soft drinks, Super Size Me. Highway to hell, that. This is what we're doing. So food industry is trying to hook us and give us in terms of more of these. It was a treat. I know growing up that my parents, we were having fish and chips that was deep fried. It was like a treat. Most nights we're sitting at home having our meal, and it was my mum would cook. Both my parents still work, but my mum would cook. And this fast food was a treat. Absolute treat. Today, it's a norm often. Kids have done well done. Friday night, let's go out and let's have McDonald's. Let's have Burger King. Let's have this. And let's go to town. It's cheaper. We can supersize me for an extra how many baht, how many dollars, so why not? That's one of our big problems. So the question I have, when I have a person who says, I eat too much, Craig, that's my problem, then I ask myself, okay, how can I help this person? How can I help them to see that maybe this isn't serving them? So I'll start with self-preservation. I'll look at their labs and I'll say, wow, look at the inflammatory markers, or look at your liver, look at this marker if they have them, and say, there's a cause and effect. And then we'll talk about things like eating too much. Now, I've talked about caloric restriction. You'll hear about caloric restriction in the next days. But why don't we even flip it? Why don't we flip this chart and say overeating? What does overeating do? Messes with this. Causes problems. Is inflammatory. Overeating, the body does not like overeating. The beautiful thing is when you eat whole foods, you eat an avocado, it's hard to eat vegetables, avocados, nuts and seeds. It's hard to eat them. The body says, I think I've had enough. But when they put fructose in there, you heard from Dr. Patna, body goes left and goes, no, all good here, keep going. All good. Have another serving. Have another one. So brain health, big one. We see in terms of the benefits in terms of caloric restriction for cancer, but obviously overeating, disrupting, affecting our digestive system. We see in terms of cardiovascular disease, diabetes, all of those things come from overeating. And getting a balance or a deficit can make a big difference. So self-preservation, appealing to that side of your client, your patient. Most of you, or many of you, have probably seen the studies they did on caloric restriction with the rhesus monkeys. We see our friend on B was allowed all you can eat on the buffet. And on this side, there was a restriction. We know this. We know overeating causes a problem. We know that in terms of free radical damage, we know it increases the aging process. It's really clear. So that's rule number 1, self-preservation, looking after yourself. But guess what? It doesn't work for everybody. I have one of the centers I work at in Phuket. The owner has battled with his weight all his life. And part of the problems is that his mindset, he knows what he should be doing. He runs a center. He would do this because he loves helping people. He loves making a difference. But for himself, it's a problem. He loves changing other people's lives. And sometimes for us, even as practitioners, we love, like you're all here because you want to make a difference. We all want to make a difference. And like the mother often gives everything to the child and neglects herself, or same for a lot of us. Same for people. So if you've ever read this book, I like this book. He's a controversial figure, but I'm always interested in what people have to say. He's a clinical psychologist. 12 Rules for Life, Jordan Peterson. And rule number 2 is treat yourself like someone you're responsible for helping. And where this comes from is actually they were studying animals. And the owner of the animal would take their pet to the vet. And the vet would say, oh, we've got all these problems. You're going to have to give your pet this medication, these treatments. And guess what? They did it. Most cases, they gave exactly what the doctor prescribed for the pet. And then they compared the compliance for the human from the doctor. And guess what happened? Forgot it. I can wait. Not as interested. Why do we care more about the pet than ourselves? Interesting question. And that's what he came up with. He said, it's happening. We see it. We look after other people. So this guy I was talking about, he would help everybody else. And even he would lose weight. Had this one thing where if he lost weight, he was giving money to charity. Succeeded. Till he gave the money over, did the charity event, and then the weight and the old habits came back. So if we can get people to think about treating them like they're responsible for someone else, make a big difference. Third one, guilt. Oh, it's a tough one. If you've grown up, I grown up in a family where it's like, you need to eat your meal because there are kids in Africa that are starving. Appreciate your food. And the truth is, the reality is, for most of the population, food is precious. But for a lot of us, it's not. For a lot of us, in terms of waste. So if there's a side and you're listening to your patient, you're listening to your client, we've all got different aspects that we can appeal to. And if we can remind them that food is precious, then maybe that makes a difference. I mean, look at that. In terms of 33% of the food is wasted. At my kids' school, they have a great initiative because they're trying to get this idea that food is precious. And the initiative is, at the table, they sit there. And at the end of the lunch meal, they have to collect all the food and they weigh it. And then they have house factions, different groups. And the least leftovers, the more points they get. And I think if we can acknowledge and look at things like that. So one of the things that I'm telling clients, one is if you can't handle that buffet, if you can't handle that all you can eat, then like an alcoholic shouldn't go into the pub, maybe you should order from the menu. And maybe you should also, if you're supersize me and you're seeing these portions, you're always like, oh my God, but these portions are so big. Then maybe you should just order the appetizer. Order a couple of them. One thing I love with my family, I love going out and I just cannot stand the kids' menu. Whoever at these restaurants designed kids' menu, they must be thinking, let's see if we can get these kids like as sick as possible. Everything deep fried. I mean, a lot of the places there. And they give them beautiful names. And they even put little things in there, how they make it up. But if we can, like I said, how we look at it and getting an understanding. If it means smaller plates, if it means at the restaurant ordering just appetizers. In my family, what we try to do at a restaurant is we'll order, which I love in Thailand, it's so great. We'll just order little dishes and put little dishes in and get them used to, oh, that's spicy and oh, this flavor and different flavors, different textures, and seeing food for something different. Not just food is to fill me up, but food is precious. Food is precious. And so we can hopefully change that. In my house, one of the things that I do, and if any of you have parents, and obviously if you're looking after, if you're talking with parents often, if their kids come in to see you and they're heading towards diabetes, they're obese, that's one of my big, it takes a lot of my time at the moment, going to schools and trying to help educate schools, educate parents. And one of the things we do in my house is every dinner we do a buffet. We don't serve our kids food. We don't dictate how much they should be eating. We try to get their intuition, their own wisdom. So what we do is we put out real foods. There's some protein, there's some carbohydrates, there's some good fats, there's a lot of fiber, meaning there's a lot of vegetables. And we give them a plate and we say, serve yourself. Now, if there's not enough vegetables, I'll sometimes give a little nudge and say, oh, something feels like it's missing. A few colors are missing. I'd love to see a rainbow on your plate. But maybe you do that too. Maybe you recommend that for your clients. So people start seeing, instead of being served up the meal, they can actually start understanding what is right for them. I said there are rules and there's individuality. And the more we can slowly get these rules down and start listening to our body and saying, oh, my body needs today a little bit more protein. So this morning I'm in the gym and I said, I feel like I train pretty hard. I feel like a little bit more protein and some good carbohydrates. Constantly asking ourselves, what does our body need? Because that food is going to become part of me. And so the more I can tune into that and the more in terms I can get that with my clients, to get them thinking, food affects me. In what way? It's going to either give me energy, it's going to crash me down, but I see a direct relationship. The more I can get clients to see that direct relationship between what I eat and how I feel and how my body is represented, the better in terms of my results. And that's why I went more from particularly at the start of my career, was a lot more training people. I love living in Thailand. Thai boxing and fighting and all that was original in my background. And so I'd be training athletes. And the more I went into it, I realized the more help that was needed was trying to get people in terms of what they eat. Get people to move as much as they can, feel good in terms of their moving, his mindset. But the confusions and the mistakes, and a lot of it is the nutritional scientist's fault. And I say nutritional science often is one of the most complicated, and we keep flip-flopping on what is good and what is bad and confusing people. But there are simple rules, like I said. And if we can get people to become more intuitive and be their own doctor, be their own patient, they can start taking responsibility for themselves and seeing how food, then we can make a big difference. So overeating, and obviously, is a big problem. So they said at the bottom of the slide, use what is left. Food is precious. For all of us, how we look at the food and seeing the majority of the world still, they talk about living on $2 a day, even in places in Thailand. I even see, but there's a lot of, in terms of areas, whether it's America or Australia, where people are struggling. And if we've got clients and they come see us and they got the money, like this lady, my problem is I eat too much, Craig. Her problem wasn't money. She was staying in a very expensive center. Her problem was she'd lost respect for food. Her problem was there was an emotional stuff that we had to work on too. So there's a big emotional, where it came from, and that's a whole different other story. But everybody's a little bit different, and sometimes even simple things can help. So in terms of getting into this idea of food, not wasting it, but again, in terms of it being precious. 6 things from our past that for me go so much further than a simple food pyramid. So over the next days, you're going to hear some amazing, in terms of research into different dietary interventions. You're going to look and say, I like this part, and you're going to have patients and clients who may need things like elimination diets, ketogenic diets, intermittent fasting. All those things, they may need them. But the first question is, do they even have some rules down? Do they have the basics down? That's what you really want to ask first of all. When you're going through your client, your patient, and for the doctors there, I understand that time is precious. I'm pretty lucky. I get an hour. I say a person must see me for an hour to start. And then I want follow-ups. Because I want to know everything I can about that person. I want to know what you eat, how you think, how you move. I get them to write a full schedule. I want to know what breakfast, lunch, dinner looks like. I want to know as much information. I want to get inside their head as much as possible. I'm lucky. Not everybody's like that. But if at least we can start off getting an understanding about what's going on, where in terms of their relationship with food is, and that's the key. This second one, let me just go back, and then I'll come forward again. What does that feel like to me? It's a relationship to food. And unfortunately, a lot of people have lost this relationship to food. Like I said, food is precious. We're not thinking about it like that. We're thinking about it's got to fill a spot. It's got to fill that gap. It's got to get me to the next break. I've just got to eat in terms of this time. These rules. Okay, I have a model when it comes to eating. I'll go through in a sec, but this is a relationship to food. This is about a philosophy of how to eat, in terms of going. And if anyone wants to see that, I can show you where to get that and to find that, and even giving it out to clients as a starting point. For me, that's one of my starting points. Understanding the client, but getting the rules down. The other parts in terms of the nutrition, for me, before I go to the final part of this talk, is I want to know not just what, but I want to know how they eat. These questions. I want to know where they eat. I want to know when they eat. I want to know in terms of what is their routine. And for me, everything is about habits. It's all about habits. My whole job is about how to transform habits. And so if I see in terms of the relationship with food, and some of their habits are, I feel like this, I eat like this. If we can recognize that and start putting in terms of interventions and say, when you feel like this, how about we switch it? And if we can plant seeds in every single one of our patients' and clients' mind about a new relationship with food, to say to them, actually food sends signals. For me, it's a messenger. Food is one of the most powerful messengers. It says how you're doing. It'll tell you how your energy is. It'll tell you how your body feels. It'll give all these signals out. That's the power of food. And that's what we want to encourage. We want to say to the person, see if you can look in terms of your relationship with food. And here's a model. So if I just go forward. 6 things. Is there a way that I could even wean it down? Well, somebody did. Somebody weaned down 6 things. Very smart guy. Might have heard of Michael Pollan. Michael Pollan writes a lot about nutrition. And he said this: eat food. Not too much. Mostly plants. So the 6 might be helpful, but even the 3 as a starting point to get the rules down, that may be enough for a lot of people. Eat real food. So remember, what is it? What is a real food? It's whole. Our grandparents understood it. It's not full of preservatives, colorings, flavorings, additives. If there's 5 ingredients and it's in a package and it was on TV, there should be a little red flag if there's more than, like I said, 20%. Understanding if that person says to you, my problem is I eat too much. Understand what tools and things you can use to try to reestablish a new relationship with food. And for me, when it comes to looking at a plate, we have these massive, one of the centers I work at has these massive plates. And I remember being introduced to them, and I looked at these plates and they were this big, and I went, oh my God, this is a health center and the plate is this big. That was the first introduction to the kitchen. But then I realized what they served. And that most of the plate that they were saying we want filled with plants, leafy greens, colors, things like that. And then I understood, okay, so you're changing the philosophy. Some people might need a smaller plate, but if not, you can tell them that fill that plate with plants. So thank you very much. I hope that was really helpful for you. And in terms of nutrition, if anyone's questions on that, please let me know. Thank you.